Hi, my name is Stephen Mulick, and I am your child's honors chemistry teacher this year. So make sure that my name and that course code match what you see on Pupil Path, otherwise, you may unfortunately be in the wrong place. Uh, I want to get to know you a little bit, or, well, I want you to get to know me a little bit. I will get to know you when we meet face to face or screen to screen. I want to start by talking a little bit about myself and a little bit about the course. Honors Chemistry. This is my 11th year at Bronx Science. I've taught honors chemistry on and off throughout there, probably about half of the years I've had an honors section. Obviously, we're looking to build a firm knowledge base of chemistry, but we're also looking to hit a bunch of skills along the way, which a lot of these you may recognize and agree that are well in line with being a scientist. And that's really the biggest goal I have for the year, to help foster science. Of course, on top of that, the idea of understanding chemistry and how atoms and molecules and ions work and interact with each other is great. I like to say that it's important that a surface level understanding of chemistry makes everyday life so much easier. From anything from like why we salt the roads when it snows outside to what to do if your laptop battery casing starts to fail, which I've had happen before, and don't put water on it. Did not make that mistake. I was glad I thought quickly, but it's good to know what's coming when things start to go sideways. I want to talk first about how class works, and then about how class is graded. So here is your schedule. We are splitting every day synchronous and asynchronous. Every day through Zoom, they use the same link to come to class. We have a 25-minute class, give or take. I strongly encourage students to both download the Zoom app to whatever device they're using to access class, and to log in with an account registered with either their Bronx Science or DOE email. That second one is completely self-serving. It allows me to quickly assign breakout rooms, which lets students have a more efficient class, and they're not at the limit of me clicking several times. The first one is more student-serving. The app is more robust when you download it instead of just going through the internet or clicking through a web page. So I always suggest that never mandated. Once the students come to class, I usually greet them, get them into breakout rooms fairly quickly. They're daily working on problem sets. The problem sets are based on what they learned the previous night or a few nights before. We come back at the end of class for a brief summary, a chance to ask questions, a chance for me to probe understanding from certain individual students. Sometimes in synchronous class, we will be doing a lab instead of everything I just said. I'll talk more about that in a bit. For the asynchronous portion, the students will have some form of instruction that they're engaging with. I post videos to YouTube and assign them through Edpuzzle, and I expect students to take notes and submit them through Google Classroom every day, unless there's a lab. If there are labs, then the asynchronous work that night is to finish the lab that was started in class. I try and schedule the labs and structure them in such a way that they are sometimes discovery of content, sometimes review of content, but usually it should be doable in, at most, I want to say 45 minutes to an hour, including those 25 minutes in class. So hoping to not be too burdensome with that. The asynchronous class, the videos through Edpuzzle, are designed to be a springboard into the coming day, which is something I have never done at Bronx Science before, but a lot of colleagues at other schools that I know have tried it to great effect. It's called a flipped classroom, if you are familiar with the term. Instead of the inquiry method, which is something that we typically pursue at Bronx Science, where the discovery of content is in the classroom, given the nature of this school year, I'm trying to flip it with the intent of making the synchronous class more about misconceptions and understanding than about delivery of information. I will say that since this is an honors course, we have the added layer of getting ready for the SAT subject test. If your child chooses to take it, it is not mandated. But because that is the course code and that is the course that is structured, the curriculum is very robust compared to the Regents class. I think it's probably about 30 to 40% more content, which means that one of these two areas of class is more flexible than the other. Most likely it's going to be the case that the 10-minute video might push higher, 15 or 20 minutes, because there's just that much more content to get through. And we're trying to limit screen time as much as possible. And in terms of the synchronous class, that's the way that the school has decided to go. A word about active participation and how the students are in synchronous class. We spend the bulk of our time in a 3 to 5 person breakout room where the students are working with each other. This is just like if we were in class, we had groups of 3 to 5 desks and the teacher circulates the room to check with students. That's exactly how it works, except I am jumping in and out of breakout rooms. That means I don't necessarily get to hear every word that is said, but that's also the case in class. Students do have the ability to flag me and bring me into their breakout room, and of course I do try and make it to every breakout room every day to at least hear some of the conversation and correct things as we go. I also use the platform Pear Deck, if you're familiar. If you're not, it's a wonderful platform that allows me to post a PowerPoint presentation or Google Slides to the class where students get an individual copy that they can write on or type into or pick a multiple choice question. And this is what it looks like on my end. And you can see, I get to see everyone's work. I can see where there are problems. For example, the bottom right-hand corner, I think I want to jump into that room because I think it's not quite done yet. And then the second one down on the left, that student is not fully understanding how to draw a Lewis structure because we're missing some valence electrons. But this is how I end up working above everyone. It's like you do have those groups, but I can see everyone's notebook at once, which is wonderful. That said, because the students are spending the bulk of their time in this breakout room, that's where the class exists. That's where the community and the culture of the class is built. And so I always advocate heavily that students are able to see and hear each other, especially in the breakout rooms, but also in general. It's very hard in a Zoom call to be the one person talking. That I understand. But at least in the breakout rooms, you should be hearing everyone, seeing everyone, and stopping to ask and answer questions because that is where the growth is most beneficial. When you have those small groups and you can progress together. And that's the idea behind the Pear Deck too. It is student-paced, but I also do ask that students pace themselves with their breakout room instead of with themselves. This might pull some people back, but also the process of answering others' questions I've found really deepens my own understanding, and I also share that with my students. About the grading policy. So you can see the categories there and how frequently all of the types of assignments happen. The Regents, as of now, is still scheduled to happen, and they've still asked us to complete all of the course content and complete the requisite lab time. They're very, very flexible on what constitutes a lab. So most of what we've done so far is simulation or some sort of interactive that they can collect data from, and then they can process that data on their own and draw their own conclusions. That happens, as it says, once every 1 to 2 weeks. And at that pace, we should have no problem meeting that Regents minimum. That said, the skills that are there are very important. The engagement is a large component of the grade, and you can see how that's broken up. I assign a participation grade weekly. They usually have a weekly homework assignment unless there's a project due, and they're submitting their asynchronous notes daily. And then there are also projects and activities that are falling into our assessment category, happen about twice a marking period. The one thing I wanted to touch on with the grading is the nature of how we're teaching this course has changed in that we've moved from 7 contact hours to 5. There was a double period, 2 contiguous periods of lab a week, which was wonderful. It's a great hands-on opportunity. It's a great opportunity for to pause in the curriculum while going and doing something different, changing your gears. That's not happening anymore because we don't have double periods. But additionally, because there is that honors curriculum where it's 30 to 40% larger, you don't have to. I'm sure you understand the math. Where if there's 30 to 40% more content, and we've shortened the amount of time, where does the time get made up? And that's where I'm really pushing to say it unfortunately has to fall largely to independent study because I'm not even seeing students for 40 minutes a day. Obviously, I do try and make myself as available as possible to answer questions, and of course, the SAT subject test is not a requirement for the course. So really, the Regents, or at least everything that you see on the screen right now is the minimum, the expectation, with room to grow into that subject test, which is a wonderful resume builder for a college application. Really quick to talk about assessments. This is a rather large shift, especially if a student is taking the subject test. That's a solo activity. It's 85 questions in an hour, just you, a reference table, and a test. Or not even a reference table, it's a periodic table. That's it. No calculator, no polyatomic ions, no nothing. Just your brain. And that's very different. Like, that is more in line with what we were doing in school before, where there were these 40-minute tests every few weeks. Now we're not doing that, or at least not everyone is doing that. I'm making the choice to shift more towards projects and activities. Is there the chance to get that multiple choice and short answer practice? Well, yes, it's there in class. Sometimes a project or an activity might have that at the end. But the idea is that these projects and activities, I think they're beneficial, both with the current mode of instruction and in general, because it's such a heavy emphasis on communication and collaboration. And that's science. I do try and take some time out of the synchronous or asynchronous class for projects, but it is expected that the students are doing those projects outside of the daily class expectations. So it might be possible that they will have a video to watch and a project due concurrently, but they've had the project for at least a week, if not longer. And so it really does, time management is probably, I think, one of the more important skills for this year. Again, I'm sure you know that. So finally, I wanted to round things off by answering the question I think I'm going to hear most often. Hopefully, if I head it off now, that'll be beneficial to all of us, because it will allow for a more efficient meeting. And that's really why I'm recording this video. I wanted the chance to get a couple things out of the way so that we can have a focused discussion about what you need to hear about in those 5-minute windows that we've been given. How can my child improve their grade? How can my son do better? How can my daughter have a better grade in the class? It's what I hear that question very frequently, and it's a completely valid question, a good one to ask. My answer is to look at pupil path, because the answer varies with the student. If you need help getting into the grades, I'm happy to set that up via email. I don't think the parent-teacher conference, I don't think that's an efficient use of time there. But take a look at how the grade is broken down. There's those 3 categories. It's the bottom of the summary of the grades. And look at which of the 3 numbers is the lowest. That's obviously the area for best growth. If it's an engagement grade, I think at home it would be good to reinforce the idea that there is work every day. Something is done and submitted every day. And so if everything gets in, even if it's late, there's the opportunity for partial credit. That will bring up the grade relative to what it is now over time. Also, active participation. Of course, I mentioned that I'm giving participation grades, and it disheartens me to walk into a breakout room and see 4 cameras off with muted microphones. That's not communication and collaboration, and I don't necessarily know what learning is taking place. And so that's not really active, and that's not really engaging with the class and the classmates and the classroom culture. If that's one of the points where the grade is lower, all the changes I just mentioned would bring that grade up. When it comes to lab reports, much like the submitted assignments for the engagement category, get it in, get it complete. If there is a problem getting the lab reports done, it would be suggested that maybe trying to organize time with the lab group outside of school, outside of class, once class ends, to make sure that work gets done. Or, I mentioned this in assessments, but I'll mention it now. I hold office hours daily, and it's just by appointment or just by stopping in. I don't really have a lot of requirements on that time, and so every day I'm willing and able to work with students to help understand if there's any problems, if there's anything that's confusing, if there's a lab that's difficult. When it comes to the assessments, there is a rubric. I always give at least a week to complete the assessment. So if the grades are suffering, I would suggest starting earlier, spending more time, and paying attention to that rubric. That's the rubric I use to grade. That's the rubric that should be used to complete the assignment. And then with any questions, obviously coming to office hours is a good idea. Students also do pull me into their breakout rooms sometimes to say, I have a question about the project. Totally fine. Happy to help. Hopefully this hit a bunch of the frequent questions of some of the baseline stuff that you might be wondering, and this knocks that out of the way so that when we do meet for parent-teacher conferences, there is a nice, robust 5-minute conversation about anything else that I didn't cover here. Look forward to meeting you. Thanks for watching.